Greetings, brothers. Today I want to discuss the First Born Librarian and how he fares up against the Lord of Death, so let's jump right in. So both are Chief Librarians, so that means cast 2 and deny 2, but straight away our Librarian in our jump pack has the ability to get +1 to his casts, making him that bit more reliable. That is going to cost you 1 CP, but he does come in 15 points less, so I guess if you can pay the CP tax, I highly recommend taking the Firstborn Librarian, and let's talk about just exactly why I think this is important. By taking a Librarian, you obviously have access to psychic powers, and Mephiston gets access to the Sanguinary Discipline. So I've ran through the Sanguinary Discipline, and I've listed each of the abilities on how good of a pick I feel they are. So obviously top tier picks to low tier picks. Now, Unleash Rage and Wings of Sanguinius kind of speak for themselves. Unleash Rage can give you a lot of extra attacks, and Wings of Sanguinius gives you mobility, and we know that Blood Angels kind of thrive on being mobile. Average picks, I would say, are Quickening, Shields of Sanguinius, and Blood Boil, all situational, all do reasonably good at what they need to do, in that Quickening gets some extra attacks. Shield of Sanguinius, you can give your invulnerable save, and Blood Boil gives you the ability to do some mortal wounds. And then I'd say the poorest choice out of the three of these is the Blood Lance, where you can do a couple of mortal wounds against multiple units, but overall it's fairly unreliable. Now, our Chief Librarian, Firstborn, can access obviously all these sanguinary powers, but they also have access to Librarian Discipline, and again I've listed these on how strong I feel they are. In the Librarian Discipline we have in top tier the Veil of Time to give a deep striking unit the ability to charge effectively, Might of Heroes giving a character or another core unit additional strength, Null Zone, which is kind of the standout one that you can remove all invulnerable saves within a 6-inch aura, and then Psychic Fortress, which is you can give all your models within a 6-inch bubble an invulnerable save on a 5-up. It doesn't even have really any average picks, it just has 2 poor picks, Fury of the Ancients and Psychic Scourge. Both these, again, can do mortal wounds. Both of them, in my opinion and my experience in 9th edition, have felt pretty lackluster and unreliable. So as you guys should know, I pride myself on winning games. I also play tournament matches, and in tournaments you need your powers to be reliable. You need to be able to make decisions and calls that are going to help you throughout the game. If your powers aren't reliable, or you don't know if you're going to be able to cast things, then that makes playing in a tournament much more difficult. And this is why I recommend to everybody, because quite a few people submit lists to me with just a Librarian with Null Zone and Psychic Fortress, for example. So this next slide that I'm going to show on the screen just is going to show all the cast chances that you get for every power basically within the 2 disciplines, and just how well you can cast with both Mephiston and the Firstborn Librarian. And it's actually pretty interesting because every single power between Librarius and Sanguinary Discipline is cast on a 6 except Null Zone. So if we start with that, so if you are just Mephiston or just regular Librarian, then you are casting 72% of the time, and if you want to use a command reroll there, you can cast 92% of the time. However, if you have Psychic Mastery, you are casting 83% of the time, which is an 11% increase. So if you think about it, if you're going to cast 10 powers over the course of the game, 2 per turn, that's 1 extra power that's going to be successful. You're essentially going to cast 8 out of 10 powers successfully. Now, if you use your reroll with Psychic Mastery, you're going to actually have a 95% chance of casting a power that is a warp charge of 6, and that is a 3.1% increase. So I guess on those key times when you really need a psychic power to go off on a 6, then here are the numbers for you. And then secondly, I want to talk about Null Zone, because Null Zone is the hardest power to cast. So if you are not the Chief Librarian and you're just trying to cast Null Zone, it's actually only a 58% reliability. If you use the reroll on that, that's 82% reliability. And this is what I say about tournament play. How can you make a call in a tournament when you only have a 58% chance of casting, or even when you only have an 82% chance of casting? You know, Psychers are notoriously unreliable. This is why some people want to take something more reliable, like a Chaplain, and auto-cast litanies, but I like my Psychers, but I like my Psyker to be reliable, and that is what Psychic Mastery gives you. If you want to cast Null Zone with Psychic Mastery, then you are on a 72% chance, so that is actually a 13.87% increase, and if you want to cast it with a reroll, it's actually 92.3%. So basically, 9 out of 10 times, or 92% chance of casting Null Zone with a reroll. And this is one of the reasons that I highly recommend, if you are going to run a librarian to take these Librarius discipline powers, then definitely consider including Psychic Mastery. So let's talk about profiles here, and when I put this profile on the screen I've highlighted in orange just which of the two units is better at what stats. So the First Born Librarian obviously has that additional movement of 12 inches, and what's cool about him is, remember, you can advance and cast psychic powers, so you can make quite a reasonable move. If you advance, the minimum you're going to go is 14 inches. So if any enemy was within 20 inches of your librarian at the beginning of the turn, then you can almost guarantee getting within range to get them into the null zone bubble. Now, both models have essentially their Force Sword, only Mephiston's Force Sword is strength 10, and your Firstborn Librarian's is just strength 5. And Mephiston is going to get more attacks, and he's slightly upgraded, I guess, because he is Primaris. And Mephiston has always had high toughness, and he also has a shrug and some additional wounds. So Mephiston is definitely stronger, there's no doubt about it, but the Firstborn Librarian is more mobile, and we often talk on this channel about how mobility is king when it comes to Blood Angels. So being able to move around the map and make the engagements where you want, the Firstborn Librarian is going to be more reliable. Mephiston can fly, but it means taking a psychic power as one of your choices, and then also there's the unreliability factor of that, right? You know, because like we just went over, he only casts on 6s. Do you really want to be spending CP so he can move? Ideally not, right? You want to be saving your CP rerolls for something like Unleash Rage or something that's going to get you insane value actually throughout the battle. Another thing I think I want to say here is in previous editions the game has definitely been felt of like Hero Hammer. Characters were very strong, they bounced around the board, they killed everything. That really isn't how characters work now. You can do it with some, but I've tried a couple of times to make Mephiston work in 9th edition, and when I tried to use him as that quote-unquote beatstick character, so that would be with him having wings, Shield of Sanguinius and Quickening, more often than not he would just go in, not do very much damage, and die. He looks like he should be good, you know, toughness 5, 2+ save, 5+ shrug, but in reality he can get killed. I don't know, a single meltagun shot. If you try and fly him forward, or you move him forward with intention to fly and you end up leaving him exposed, a single meltagun shot can take him out. So yeah, my experience with Mephiston has been rough. I've had more success with Mephiston running him with like Shield of Sanguinius to maybe improve like Sanguinary Guard or Dreadnought saves, Blood Boil to just deal out some mortal wounds, and also Unleash Rage, as I mentioned. I run a squad of 7 Sanguinary Guard, and Unleash Rage seems to burst about 10 additional attacks when we cast it. So overall, it's generally pretty good. But I do think if you want to compare the Sanguinary Discipline against the Librarian Discipline, the Librarian Discipline to me is just the better of the two choices as it stands. I think the standout powers there are Null Zone and Psychic Fortress. I think everybody's picking those. I think maybe slightly less Veil of Time and Might of Heroes, but both are also very good powers. I just don't think Mephiston's an attractive option at 115 points. If he had the +1 to cast, then maybe. But I think if you're picking a Psyker, you want your psychic powers to be reliable, especially if the enemy are going to try and deny. Remember, we've not even talked about how denies work here, but the +1 to cast is also going to make it harder for the enemy to deny throughout the battle as well. So if you're picking a Psyker and you want reliable psychic powers, then for me it has to be the Firstborn Librarian. And if we look back into not running Mephiston as like a smash character that maybe he was in previous editions, because before he could get a lot of attacks, now he gets an average number of attacks. Yes, you can buff them, but I think because Mephiston can get killed very quickly, I think you're going to end up probably trying to kill infantry with him, and if you are going to go after enemy infantry, then there's not a heap of difference between his sword and the Firstborn Librarian's sword. Yes, he has some more attacks, but strength 5 with +1 to wound is the same as strength 10 with +1 to wound against like toughness 4. You're still wounding on 2s on both. And then I think the other thing that I like to think is that your Firstborn Librarian, if you've got 5 points left over at the end of your list, why not give him an Infernal Pistol? Because when he jumps forward and puts something into the Null Zone range, then arguably you could shoot them with an Infernal Pistol at -4 or -5 if we're an Assault Doctrine. Nothing's going to save on -5, I guess. Maybe a Deathwing Knight will save on -5, but 90% of the enemies aren't going to save on -5. That's a potential to do 8 damage, which is arguably going to be more damage than Mephiston can ever do with his sword. But if we look at recent tournament successes, I think that the Space Marine lists that are doing really well are running a lot of units like Redemptor Dreadnoughts, and also even so much so like Vanguard Veterans or Sanguinary Guard or Death Company. And all these units can get a lot of value from the Psychic Fortress, and Veil of Time also can be giving them a lot of value. You know, when you arrive from Deep Strike, you want to have a rerollable charge, but you maybe don't want to spend CP on that. That's something else that your First Born Librarian can provide. And also, if he is the Psychic Master, then it's going to make using Smite that bit easier as well when you do want to Smite. And also, you're more likely to get those, basically, those super smites of the additional mortal wounds too. If you are running Redemptor Dreadnoughts, or even Contemptor Dreadnoughts, which are very popular as well, if the enemy are trying to focus down one and kill it, if you can then cast Might of Heroes on it and put it up to Toughness 8, and then maybe repair it or get it back into Psychic Fortress, that is also very strong as well. I had a lot of success against that, using that against Drukhari actually at the last tournament, because normally those Dark Lances are going to wound on 3s, but put Might of Heroes on a Dreadnought, they're only going to wound on 4s. And I did win against Drukhari in one of my games, and the other game was very, very close. So, First Born Librarian for me has been a staple now in my list for about 20 games. I have won probably 18 of those 20. This character always provides value. Null Zone can provide insane value in some situations. You know, in the tournament I played, the Harlequins had the ability to put their jet bikes on a 3-up invulnerable save. Well, I just jumped forward, Null Zoned them and killed them. And I think he'd spent 2 or 3 CP to do that. There is great power in this Librarian. I think he's generally pretty reliable as long as you have 1 CP for those odd casts, which I generally do in my lists. I prefer him to the Chaplain, and I have ran the Chaplain on the bike, the Primaris one, who is a good character, and I mean I've done videos on him as well. I'll put some of them up here because he can be very useful. The Librarian with the jump pack, it took me a long time to see the light and go after this guy, but once you see that light, he is a core part of what we can do to win games in 9th edition. I'm really enjoying playing him. I hope you enjoyed the video today. If you have any comments on any questions, leave them down below. I do answer every comment on this channel. If you got value in the video, I would love it if you hit the subscribe button or the like button. Both would be mega appreciated. I will link another tactics video up here if you haven't got some time to watch some more Blood Angels content. I'd appreciate it if you hit the next video. And if not, then fine. I'll catch you in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. By the blood are we made strong, brothers. Peace.